Hi guys, and welcome to another collection of mini reviews. So if you don't know, this is a series where I basically review 7 films in the time that it would normally take me to review just one. So we're going to have 6 horror film reviews today and 1 wildcard pick, which is non-horror. And if you've studied the thumbnail closely enough, you've probably already guessed what the non-horror film is. Now, for the first time ever today in one of these types of videos, I'm going to be doing a couple of extra reviews right at the very end. So we're going to have extra time, or overtime, as you might say in America. And the reason for this is quite simply that I've watched too much stuff over the past few weeks. But I'm keeping those 2 reviews at the end separate from the rest of the video. And the reason for that will become apparent when we get there. Now, I'm going to take all these reviews in the exact chronological order in which I watched them, and as we're going along, there will be a film of the week, yay, and also a stinker of the week, boo. So let's dive in, shall we, and find out what is our first film up for review. I loved the original Smile. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5, and I actually rewatched it quite recently in preparation for Smile 2, but I found the second one something of a lackluster follow-up. It doesn't kick off very well, so we begin with one of the surviving characters from the first movie, except he's shown to be an absolute idiot in this second film. But even when we get into the main storyline, which involves a pop star attracting the curse somehow, there are a number of problems with this film. Firstly, I'm getting very tired of seeing megastars as main characters in horror movies. Now, a week before I saw this, I watched The Substance with Demi Moore, who's playing a Hollywood A-lister who's so big and famous she's got her star on the Hollywood sidewalk. And then a week later I'm watching Smile 2, featuring a main character who is this huge pop star with billions of fans. She's basically another Taylor Swift. And I just think to myself, could we not have a main character who is mid-tier in the musical world? Maybe she's had a few hits here and there, maybe she's getting by as an artist, but also there are struggles, you know, she's not quite made it into the mainstream. I'd find that more interesting. I think if you did that, we'd get an interesting film about the music industry as well as an interesting horror film. But as it is, there's nothing to latch onto here when it comes to the musical side of this. They've just made the main character like, oh yeah, big megastar with billions of dollars, and she can do what she wants. She can embarrass herself, and it's not going to affect her sales the next day. I don't know. Whether I would have had this same complaint if I hadn't watched The Substance the previous week, I don't know, but it was something very much on my mind as I watched this. Another problem, arguably a bigger one, is the fact that there's no real investigation into what the demon is throughout this film. So one of the best things about the original was the fact that the main woman, once she realised what was going on, she was looking back into the previous deaths, she was following the chain, following the links. And there's some really good creepy stuff there, especially when she looks into the video footage and sees like the petrol attendant killing a woman. But there's none of that investigation in Smile 2. The main character is just surviving being haunted, and that's it. Now, I get the fact that they can't just have the same investigation again, but that's one of the problems of sequels. You've got to think your way out of that. You've got to come up with something. You can't just have this pop star just sitting around being scared all the time. There is a pretty cool ending, which is kind of confusing, but I actually welcomed that after the simple straightforwardness of everything up to that point. And I'll give the film its due. There are, you know, a few good atmospheric scenes along the way to keep you entertained. There's one good one where there's like 20 makeup artists and what have you just like crawling over the ceiling and walls trying to get to this character. But I don't know, I walked home thinking to myself, I'm not too bothered if they don't do a Smile 3. So speaking of the number 3, I'm going to give this film 3 out of 5. Longlegs is a film with a big reputation, so I was quite happy to spend £5 to rent this on Amazon Prime. It's a kind of police procedural / horror film. It's about this woman who works for the FBI. She's played by Maika Monroe, who was the lead in It Follows. This woman, she's chasing after a serial killer who kills little girls sort of every few years, but only on their birthdays. So he's kind of like a pattern killer, and so far the FBI have not been able to catch him. But this woman has an advantage that her fellow agents do not, which is the fact that she has psychic powers. So she quickly gets on this killer's trail, and we go from there. Though I didn't find this character very compelling. She's very bland, it's got to be said. Nevertheless, I was enjoying this film greatly for over an hour. There's a really great atmosphere to it. I like the fact that it's set back in the 70s or 80s, because there's no tech in this movie, really. It feels very old school. It's beautifully shot. The problems come with the ending. Eventually, in any film like this, you've got to have the big reveals and the answers. And when they come here, I just didn't like them. They go for something completely different from what I wanted with this. You know, that won't be the same for everybody. Some people will get to the end of this and think, wow, I love this film all the way to the end, and it gave me exactly the answers I wanted. But for me, it was kind of like, really? You're going with that? So I'm going to give this 3.5 out of 5, which is still a really solid score. But I was kind of wondering whether this would be a 5 out of 5 based on the film's reputation, because people were talking about this in Facebook groups and on the internet and stuff. But how often does that happen where, you know, the whole world's going giddy over a movie saying it's a masterpiece, it's the best film of the year, and then when you get to it yourself, you're kind of like, well, it's good, but not much more than that. You know, it was the same in the previous mini reviews video I did with Strange Darling, exactly the same sort of reputation, and I just found that film awful. But let's not go overboard. This is still a solid watch, and you might even enjoy it more than I did. But for me, it's a good but not great 3.5 out of 5. Next up, we have Possessor. So this film has a really great little thumbnail on whichever streaming platform you spot it on. So it used to be the case back in the 80s that if you had great VHS box art, then that could earn you a truckload of cash. Having a good-looking box was better than having a good movie inside the box, sort of a thing. That's not really the case anymore, but I do maintain that if you have a really great thumbnail, then you will get more watches. And the thumbnail for this film, it's sort of yellow with a shuddery head, and I've gone past this thumbnail quite a few times over the weeks and months thinking, oh, that looks really snazzy, and I'd never gone into it, but I did a few weeks ago finally check out this film. I didn't know that it was by Brandon Cronenberg at the time. Now, I watched one of his other films, Infinity Pool, earlier this year, and I really didn't like it. So when I saw his name pop up at the start of this, I thought, oh God, am I going to regret this? But I'm pleased to say that this is way better than Infinity Pool. And I'm actually surprised that he didn't make this after Infinity Pool somehow. But this is a film about a government department of assassins, but they've got this tech that allows them to send an assassin's consciousness into the body of somebody else, like a passerby in the street. So they can take over that host body and then go and perform the hit. And it gives them a safety net. So if the host gets caught, then there's still some distance between the police and the people who are actually carrying out the contract. And often, if the hit goes well, then the host will just commit suicide. So it's a nasty business, this, because every time there's a contract, it's actually two people who are getting killed, really. The intended victim and also the host who's being used as a patsy kind of a thing. But the main character in this story has got no scruples about having this as her career. She's got a kid and an ex-boyfriend nearby, but I don't think they know what she does for a day job. Now, once the film properly gets going, this woman takes on this big new contract and she's got to kill Sean Bean, essentially. But that, in theory, that's quite easy, you know. I mean, Sean Bean dies in pretty much every film, so even if you miss Sean Bean with a sniper rifle, that's absolutely fine, because 5 minutes later he'll probably slip over on a banana skin and crack his skull on the side of the bathtub. Job done either way. But this woman's mission to kill this guy is really enjoyable to watch, and she has to go into the body of a man. So while she's getting ready for the hit, she's also got to adjust to the fact that she's now in a man's body. She even has sex with the man's girlfriend at one point just to maintain her cover, which is really weird for her. So there's some great body horror in this. Lots of twists and turns. The movie is gorgeously shot, but Brendan Cronenberg has that in him. The one good thing about Infinity Pool for me was the fact that it looks so stylish, it looks so gorgeous. It's just a shame that the story and the characters weren't up to much, but this is a really solid effort. I liked this a lot, and I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. So we've arrived at the wildcard pick, and also, as it happens, the film of the week. Yes, Gladiator 2 is our film of the week, a fact I find kind of depressing given the fact that this is a horror channel and the horror films greatly outnumber the non-horror films in this video. But I'm not surprised this has happened, actually, because I watch a lot of horror films and I have to wade through a lot of mediocrity to get to the really good ones that I like, whereas with non-horror, I don't watch as many of those, so I'm very selective, very picky about what I watch. So I actually think this situation could happen again in future mini reviews videos. I've got a long history with Gladiator, though. I went to watch the first one at the cinema in the year 2000. I was only 19 at the time. I saw it with my first ever girlfriend, and I wasn't even looking forward to the movie. Literally, we were just bored students on a Saturday afternoon looking for something to do, went to watch this movie, and I came out and I was almost wobbling, and my emotions were all over the place. I was like, Jesus, what a movie! That said, I never really wanted a sequel, and I think the only reason I went to see this one at the cinema, Gladiator 2, is because Ridley Scott was directing it, and I'm a big Ridley fan. If this had been in the hands of anyone else, I almost certainly would have skipped it and just watched it on streaming. Now, this film does feel kind of samey in terms of what it does with the plot, especially in the first half. You know, we've got slaves who shouldn't be slaves, we've got emperors who are corrupt, we've got Colosseum games. It's a lot of the same stuff, but in the second half of the film, it does move away and try and become its own thing. This one isn't as emotional as the first film, but arguably this one is a slightly more involving story with more twists, maybe. The only thing I'll say about a possible part 3, which Ridley has hinted at, I think if they do that, they're going to have to do something wildly different, because I think we've come to the end now of Colosseum games. I mean, there's some gimmicky stuff going on in this film, like sharks and rhinos in the arena, and come on, we've taken this as far as we can now, surely. So if they do a third film to like round out a trilogy, I think they're going to have to sort of Halloween ends it. They're going to have to come up with something way different, like maybe show some wars with other nations, you know, take the action out into wider Rome and stuff like that, but not as much in the arena next time, please. That said, I really enjoyed this film. I would say it's a worthwhile sequel. I might not have enjoyed it as much if they'd have brought it out like 2 or 3 years after the first one, but the fact that there's been such a long wait, I was just really into it. I had an appetite for it, and yeah, I was thoroughly happy as I waltzed my way home. So I'm going to give this one 4 out of 5, which is the same score I gave Possessor. However, I'm going to give this film the referee's wink, if you like, and say that this one is the best of the video. Triggered has a fantastic premise. Like, as soon as I read the blurb for this, I knew I had to watch it. In fact, this is one of the most spontaneous watches of a horror film I've ever done. I literally read the description and was like, oh, great, yes, pressed play right then and there. Didn't even go and make a coffee first. So this is about 9 campers. They're all friends from college or whatever. They've all got their own interpersonal relationships going on. And one day on this trip, they wake up in the woods and they've all got bomb jackets strapped to them. And John Kramer would be proud of the handiwork here. There's no way these characters are getting these things off. And each one has got an explosive device with a timer on it. And it doesn't take a genius to work out what will happen when the timer reaches 0. Now, interestingly, each timer has a different amount of time on it. What the killer wants the characters to do here is to kill each other. And what will happen is, so let's say one of the characters, a guy, kills his girlfriend. What will then happen is he will get the time that was on his girlfriend's jacket given to his timer, so he will now have more time because he killed somebody, right? So I guess the person who has the most time at the start of this game has a slight advantage over the others. But it's one of the cool things about this movie, getting to see the allegiances that form, you know, who goes after who, how people react to the fact that, you know, their timer is getting close to the end. They have to go more attacking, say. The trouble is, this film is very cheap. You can tell that most of the budget went on these expensive-looking jackets because, location-wise, it looks like this whole thing is set in the same 50-yard stretch of woods, but from different camera angles. Aesthetically, this is a very ugly movie. There's not much going on in terms of character work. The dialogue is terrible. The kills are fairly mundane, even the ones where explosions are happening and limbs are flying off. There's also a massive problem with light in this film. So because this is all taking place in the woods at night, they've had to figure out a way to light the characters. So what I think they've done is they've set up some kind of light stage, like some way away from where people are talking to each other. But it's just so obvious that this light source is there. It's as if the story has a UFO in it that's landed with all of its lights shining outwards and none of the characters are acknowledging or referencing its presence. It's so off-putting. I've never seen a film have a problem like this. All the way through this, I'm just thinking, where is that light coming from? It's so unnatural. So something for the director of this film, I think, to work on for when he does another movie in the future. I'm going to give this 2 out of 5, which does make it our stinker of the week, though we've certainly had stinkier films than this in our review series. But there's a caveat today to me calling this the stinker of the week, and that will become clear when we get to the extra time section. I'm making this all sound very confusing, but everything will be revealed. But for now, Triggered is our stinker of the week. Contrary to the film Triggered that we were just talking about, this film, Black Cab, has a very boring premise. So we've got a young bickering couple here who get into a cab at the end of a night out, and they are swiftly abducted by a psychopathic cab driver. Now, I think this film missed a little bit of a trick here. I would have made this a spin-off of the James Bond film Live and Let Die. I would have brought back that villainous Harlem taxi driver from that film. You know, that guy who's like, hey, for an extra $50, man, I'll take you to a Ku Klux Klan convention. That guy. Yeah, I would have brought him back and given him his own spin-off, and that would have been fantastic, albeit that they would have had to have used a different actor at this point. But I'm guessing that Barbara Broccoli would have charged the makers of this film about 15 million quid just for that one little side character, probably. But instead of him, we have this brand new cab driver. He's this massive, overweight Londoner, and he's a very annoying villain, actually. I didn't really enjoy the first half of this film. The setup was kind of boring anyway, but I stuck with it and I was rewarded because there's a lot of interesting twists that happen in the second half of this, and it's more of a ghost story than a thriller, and I don't think that's giving anything away. Because from a very early stage, the woman in this relationship is seeing various spectral images, and we find out more about that as the story develops. But this gets very complex, it's very creepy in places, and I really liked it. But I could see quite a number of people maybe switching it off if they're not really enjoying it after 15, 20 minutes. You've got to stick with this one, it's good. But there's something extra spooky for me about British ghost stories, because I'm British myself. I don't know, it's the fact that it could be happening on my doorstep that just makes it extra creepy. I think that's why The Conjuring 2 is my favourite of those movies. But I would absolutely recommend this one. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. So we've had three films in this video so far that have all had 4 out of 5, but I still maintain Gladiator 2 just gets the nod out of those. Our final film today, at least in the main portion of the video, is Don't Move. Now, I got this from Netflix. It's the only Netflix film today, and I was really impressed with it, given the fact that I'd never heard of it before. So this is a film with a very short cast list. There's only 3 people in this film, I think maybe 4. So it starts off with this woman going into some national park or another, and she's intending on committing suicide because she's not fully managed to get over the death of a child. She's going to throw herself off a cliff, but this guy just comes out of nowhere and talks her out of it. But it turns out he's only done this so that he can get her back to his car and then drug her so he can take her to his cabin and rape her for the weekend. Nice chap. Not. But the woman manages to get free, but not before he's already sunk the needle in. So she's got this paralytic drug inside her, and what it's going to do is it's going to make her completely motionless after about an hour. It takes about an hour for the effects to wear in properly. So that's how much time she has to get away from this guy, roughly an hour. After that, she's just going to be on the ground, like completely still, and then she'll be at his mercy. So it's a nice little setup. I can't remember seeing a story like this before, and there's a lot more to this film than what I'm letting on. That there's some extra stuff that I'm not divulging deliberately. I'll leave that for you to discover. But this is a really nice thriller horror. There's some great scenery. Like, this is the complete opposite to Triggered. Like, Triggered, it's just a small little bit of the woods in the dead of night. It looks crap. But this film, we get loads of gorgeous looking American parkland. There's like forestry and lakes and cliff faces and lots of location changes. Visually, it's a really nice film, and I got into the excitement of watching this woman running away from this really creepy guy. Lots of good little scary scenes where the guy almost catches up to her but doesn't, you know, that kind of stuff, and a great finale as well. I'm going to give this one 3.5 out of 5. It was very unlucky, actually, not to get 4, but maybe part of me just didn't want to give another film 4 out of 5. So I would definitely recommend that one. It's on Netflix. So we've come to the end of the main portion of this video. We finished our 7 reviews. It's now time to go into extra time, aka overtime. So let's find out what the first of our 2 extra time videos is. Imaginary is a film which came on at the cinema a year ago, maybe. I almost went and saw it. I can remember sort of seeing it on at my local cinema, and I was contemplating going, and I didn't in the end. But this film got really negative reviews from memory. And when I saw it on Amazon Prime going for free the other night, I thought, oh, I'll check that out now, because surely it's not as bad as they were making out. And given that they gave it a full cinematic release, there must be something about it. I'll stick it on, see how we get on. So it's basically a ghost story of sorts. This couple take over this like abandoned orphanage type house, and they're sort of converting it back into a place where they can have foster kids, and turns out there's a spirit in the building, and various haunty scenes start happening, but it's so boring. Like, the reason why I've had to put this in the extra time section is that I simply couldn't finish it. I think it's about an hour 45 minutes long. I got about halfway and I was just going out of my mind watching this thing. I just couldn't continue. I did let it carry on in the background, but for the second half of the film, I was absolutely on my phone. I wasn't watching what was going on anymore. It's not often that a film literally stops me watching it after like half the running time, but this was just one of those. I just couldn't face any more of it. Like, dull characters, dull setups, storyline that's just so derivative of every supernatural film I've ever seen. I think there's another one that Blumhouse put out, Night Swim, that was atrocious as well. Like, they need to stop putting out these really bad supernatural knockoffs of things like The Conjuring, because they're just not capable of making films as good as The Conjuring or Insidious. But this was just bad, like really bad. It's one thing to come across a film like this that's bad, but it's also buried at the back of like the Amazon Prime catalogue, and who cares? But this is a film that got a cinematic release. They've got to be doing better than this. This is atrocious. So I can't even give this a score, because I didn't even finish it, but it absolutely would have got Stinker of the Week if it had been in the main body of the video. So that film, Triggered, has been a bit unlucky today in picking up the Stinker Award. It shouldn't have picked up the award. This should have picked up the Stinker Award, but like I said, I just couldn't get through it, sorry. So our second and final review of the extra time section is Lara Croft Tomb Raider, or whatever they've called it. This is another Netflix thing. So I was lying earlier when I said that there's only one Netflix review in this video. The reason why I've buried this one in the extra time section is not because it's terrible, like Imaginary is. I simply didn't finish this, or at least I hadn't finished it at the time of recording this video. So this is an 8-episode animated show showing Lara Croft going around the world, having various adventures, but at the time of speaking, I've only watched the first 5 of the 8 episodes, but what I have watched so far has been extremely good. Lara Croft is usually somewhere different in every episode, having some random adventure. It's a lot of fun. I actually think I'm enjoying this more than the Terminator animated series, and I think I gave that quite a positive review. So if you are in any way inclined to enjoy this sort of thing, a Tomb Raider animated show, then go for it. Dive into this and have fun with it. They've already renewed it for season 2. Although I'm probably looking forward more to the live action series that Amazon have got lined up. There's a lot going on in the world of Tomb Raider at the minute. Games, shows, films in the pipeline potentially. But getting back to the point, I've really been enjoying this, and I will definitely be watching those final 3 episodes fairly shortly. Right, that's definitely the end of the video. So just to recap, Gladiator 2 is the film of the week, but I would also highly recommend Possessor and Black Cab. Our official stinker of the week is Triggered, but our unofficial stinker of the week is Imaginary. So I'm really sorry for making it so complicated and convoluted today. I don't know if I'm going to have more instances of extra time in future videos like this, but we'll see how it goes. But for now, I will bid you farewell. Goodbye.